Education. What does that entail? Education is the scapegoat to social mobility and elitism in society. College and higher education has always served as an epicenter of higher status. Education opens the doors for many people to gain new jobs, new opportunities, and new experiences that they may have never had that were out of reach. Education is the reason that so many people are able to delve into activities that they didn't think were possible for themselves. Education opens the doors for people to become more self aware of things outside in the world, more self aware of who they are as a person, and it helps them grow. Education is the reason that I am standing here today and why I feel that it is so important. And education is beautiful and so important to Black Americans. And to say that education for Black Americans is a stepping stone to how we build community. So we're going to get into that today and talk about how education is something that Black Americans value. And this is called freedom of the pen. Introduce myself. I'm Erin Crittenden, but here on YouTube, I'm going to go by Juris Nicole. And this is my very first video essay here on the platform. I'm very new to this. I have never done this before. I grew up watching video essays, and I've always said that I wanted to record them myself. So this is serving as kind of a childhood dream for me, and I'm very excited to be presenting research that I have done for my last year in college, and let this be the start to something new as far as doing more research on projects that I feel pertain to my well-being and pertain to my life and what I think is important. So yes, this is Freedom of the Pen. This is a video essay that I've been writing for the last few months, and I feel that this project is more important than I am. This project represents where I come from, who I am, what I believe in, what I value, and so I'm very excited for you guys to listen to my research today. And also, before we get into this video, if you haven't and if you want to, please like, share, and subscribe. Oh my God, I feel like such a YouTuber right now. But please like, share, and subscribe. And then you can also follow me on my social medias. My Instagram being Nicole_Crits13. So that is NACOLE underscore CRITT 13. I post daily life content on there. I also post fun things that I do as far as my reading, my college days. So if you want to check out my personal Instagram page, you can. I also have a TikTok, which is Nicole_Crit. That is something that I've had for a while. So yes, now that we have all of the introductions out of the way, let's get into freedom of the pen. So yes, let's move into part one, which is integration was the means to education. So we cannot have this conversation about the value that Black Americans have with education without talking about how we even how we even got into the means of having education and how we value it now. So as we know, in the 1950s and 60s, or from the 1930s and 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, timeline's right. Yes, segregation was a thing in the South. Jim Crow laws were real, and if you are somebody that is not from America, a lot of people, my friends who are international, do not know what Jim Crow laws are. To sum it up, they were basically laws that segregated Black and white people or colored people from white people in public places, public spaces, restaurants, anything you can think of, it was segregated. And one of those things that was segregated that made things harder for education was schools. So yes, Black students had their own schools. And the one thing that I will say is that these schools, even though they were separated, Black schools were not funded as well as white schools. There are a documentary that I feel like really, really talks about this topic of integration and the idea of where education comes from integration and segregation is We Are Rising, which is a documentary that I watched to help me prepare for this video essay. And in the documentary, they talk about this videographer that photographed or videoed the pathway to school, or like how kids got to school from Black students versus white students. So in the white neighborhoods, he showed that the little white children, they got on school buses and they were driven to school and they had a nice school bus to go on. And all of the Black children had to walk to their schoolhouses that were miles and miles and miles away from their homes. And then the one thing that did go into the documentary is how, even though these schools were underfunded, many people, no matter what level of education they had, compelled themselves to teach what they knew, because that's just how much you valued it. And basically, even if somebody just had like a second grade education, they taught that second grade education to that child to make sure that they at least knew how to read and write in some capacity. And with little resources, things were able to still be done. A lot of people were still able to go to school and gain somewhat of an education in the Black community. But yes, these schools were incredibly underfunded, were incredibly not taken care of. And it just really shows that it's hard. So as we go so that's more so the K through 12 route of integration in schools. And integration in schools did not happen until Brown v. Board Education, which was the Supreme Court case that was able to bring schools to be integrated. I'm not going to go too in depth on Brown v. Board because I don't think it's really necessary for this, but if you do, you can do more research on it. It's a very interesting case in the Supreme Court. Basically, it was talking about the underfunding of Black schools, and that's what later on led to integration into at least K through 12. Now, we're talking more so today about higher education and college and universities. So we're going to get into how the creation of HBCUs happened and where they came from, because I feel like talking about HBCUs is so imperative to how we talk about education for Black people. So a lot of people believe in the myth that HBCUs were started and funded and privatized and done by Black American people. It's a partial half truth. What we see now as HBCUs wouldn't have happened without Black people, but there is a little note that most people do not know, and that is HBCUs were actually started by white elites. They were not started by Black people. So, what do I mean by started by white elites? So basically, back then, HBCUs were actually not called HBCUs. They were called the Institutes for Colored Youth. And at these Institutes for Colored Youth, they were not regular colleges and universities for Black students, but rather vocational schools that were used to help teach vocational work and technical work to Black students that they could do pretty much manual labor for their white counterparts as they graduated. And a lot of people did not like this, obviously, because they were not learning traditional ways of learning, such as liberal arts and regular majors as white students were at white universities. So here's where we get into an interesting paradigm and paradox that I like to call the triangle or the Venn diagram of traditional learning. And so we're going to be talking about three very important Black thinkers and very, very important Black people in the educational movement. And yes, let's get into that. So the first one is Booker T. Washington. So to get some cons about Booker T. Washington, he was somebody that really did prize vocational learning. He's somebody that really wanted people to delve deep into pretty much servitude as far as manual labor for Black people. He thought that it would bring a lot of advancement to the Black community, because basically we would still make enough money and, we wouldn't have to deal with, white people being mad at us and stuff like that. Yeah, that's not fun. So yes, Booker T. Washington was known and loved by many white people and many white elites because he spoke and said, we need these institutes for colored youth. We need these schools so that we can really serve white people well and, really have the means to move forward and not on blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? He had people crying out, falling out on the floor like, oh my God, he's speaking the truth. when in reality he was talking about servitude towards white people. I'm not going to get into how mad that makes me, but for the most part, he believes that we should keep things the way they were and there's nothing that needs to be changed. So then we had some people that did not like that, obviously, amongst the Black community, amongst Black thinkers. And one of those lovely people who I still find in some ways a little bit controversial on my own personal belief because of his beliefs. But yes, talking about somebody who's a Black thinker is somebody that definitely changed the mold of what it means to have Black people in higher education. And that would be none other than W.E.B Du Bois. And yes, he actually counteracted a lot of things that Booker T. Washington was saying. And he said, no, we're not doing this. And we're going to get a little bit into that. But first, I'm going to learn. But yes, we were getting into talking about W.E.B Du Bois. So W.E.B Du Bois, if you do not know, he was not only a Black thinker, someone who's a highly educated and scholar amongst Black people during this era and also beyond. He's one of the greatest educational minds to cross American, not only literature, but also just American scholarship. And he was a big voice in the advancement of Black people and prioritizing Black people that wanted to, basically he was responsible for upholding the idea of the talented 10th. So if you don't know what the talented 10th method is, or not method, but like the ideology around it, is basically the best of the best and the brightest and educated of Black American people. He wanted there to be more people that become part of the talented 10th, and he wanted those people to be running things in the means of activism and growth for the Black community. And yes, he was a huge proponent of that. And that is why W.E.B Du Bois is very prized in the Black educational community. But yes, he obviously, for lack of better words, could not stand anything Booker T. Washington was saying. So to talk about this, I'm going to get into a book that he wrote, and that is The Souls of Black Folks, one of his most famous kind of like theoretical essay type. It's not a novel. What do I call it, Aaron? It's like an essay, but it's a book that he wrote called Souls of Black Folks, where we were talking about basically what our idea of being Black is based on the viewpoint of white people. And some of the things that I feel are very necessary to talk about in the Souls of Black Folks. I'm looking at my notes. If you see me looking over here, my notes are sitting right here. So I'm just turning my head to see. Masses and from the mainstream are meant to be an apology to the idea of being Black. So similar to, so we're not getting into Woodson yet, but we're going to talk about basically one quote that I felt was really important from the Souls of Black Folks. And it states, it is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of the world that looks in amused contempt of pity. So what I take from that line, it's basically his discussion of how we normally in education, in these, especially during this time, to counteract what Booker T. Washington was saying, is that we see ourselves in the eyes of white people. We see our education in the eyes, in the guise of white people. And we do not have our own form and knowledge of education based on what we want to learn. And it's kind of how we view ourselves and view our souls through that sense and knowledge. Now I would say that my thing with W.E.B Du Bois, he was more so on the side of teaching more traditional senses of learning, traditional reading, writing, and proficient in rhetoric and research and things like that. So things that mainly that they were doing at white universities. And I will say that it was because of his experience at Harvard, I believe. He did have that education. So that is part of the reason why I would say that, he kind of believes more so in the traditional sense of learning and reading and rhetoric. And that's something that he wanted more Black people to pertain into. But for the most part, they really want to drive past my video right now. Y'all are pissing me off. Okay. But for the most part, But W.E.B Du Bois was prioritizing making sure that the main people running and doing shit were, I'm going to say that, but doing it were the Black elites and the talented tenth of people. So yes, that is what he stated. So kind of, we know W. Du Bois now, we know Booker T. Washington. Now we're going to move into our last thinker and who kind of intersects this Venn diagram of Black consciousness, and that is Carter G. Woodson. So if you don't know who Carter G. Woodson is, he is also another Black these are all men, by the way. I know I should have done more. We're gonna get into more women later on in this video, but these are all just kind of the men that founded this idea of education for Black people. I know we need to get into some Black women that have done things, which there are plenty, and we're gonna get into that later. But so for Carter G. Woodson, he is known for writing his amazing op-ed that I actually really enjoyed reading for this project, and that is The Miseducation of the Negro. If I'm not mistaken. Where is it? Yeah. So The Miseducation of the Negro. So in this op-ed or in this essay, he does talk a lot about the creation of schools and learning and where we come from. And he is also counteracting and backhanding Booker T. Washington for his debages arcs, maybe. But yes, basically he kind of the sum up that I got from reading this is that he's showing how white people have always tried to shape our education, which is something that we've been talking about for a while here, and that the means of what is valuable to learn and what we considered valuable in our own personal learning, which we're going to get into that more later when we talk about bell hooks. I know. I'm such a Black literary mind for that. But yeah, we're going to talk more about that regard when we get into bell hooks. But right now, talking about Carter G. Woodson, Carter G. Woodson, he talks about the means of what is valuable to learn and where does education lead us in a white society. He talked about this very deeply in his essays in regards to the miseducation of the Negro. And I don't know if there's any quotes that I grabbed from it. I hope that I did. I guess I didn't grab any quotes, guys. But yes, Miseducation Negro is a very good essay to read, and I can link it in this video below and give you the PDF for it because I feel that if you are a Black person that is in education, that is in higher ed, you need to read this op-ed. It is so important to know the context of what we consider valuable in our learning as Black Americans in education. And basically, he really used this essay to kind of counteract what everyone thought Black people were meant to be doing. And he wanted more people to understand that, hey, there are different avenues of learning that actually help and grow our platform as Black Americans that will actually help advance us. And we will talk actually at the very last part of this video, we will talk a little bit more about that advancement when we get into another beautiful Black lady who wrote pretty much predicting the future. But yes, for the most part, that is where we are at when it comes to these Black literary thinkers and these people that have prioritized this for years. So yes, for growing and learning and what's valuable to Black education, this is later what led on to the creation of what we now know as historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs to be short and frank. So basically, it took a lot of these people that were already like highly educated, that went to different types of universities, to come back to these institutes of colored youth and to set the foundation for there to be more different traditional learning within these institutes of colored youth. So basically, if it wasn't for W. Du Bois, if it wasn't for Carter G. Woodson, we would not have traditional majors and minors and concentrations at these historically Black college universities if it wasn't for their work and them advocating for it, and many other Black literary thinkers and many other Black literary. Sorry, guys. I'm an English major. But many more Black people to come in and actually grow the idea of what was learning and what was actual good learning for Black people. So yes, because of the idea of the talented tenth, because of W.E.B Du Bois, we now, for the most part, have HBCUs and Black college universities, and schools are completely integrated, and we have our own sense and our own foundations for education, and that is where we kind of lead on to our part 2. All right, so this is an interview with my mom and my cousin and my auntie about the value of education and how it plays in our community as far as educators go, and as far as how Black educators educate their Black children. So I guess the first question, I guess for all of you one at a time, is what year did you start teaching and what influenced you to teach?
I started teaching in 1995. This is year 30. And I was influenced by my uncle, Dr. Frederick Todd, who was a district assistant superintendent. And he was a great influence on me in regards to making me have a love for education.
Okay, Cousin Stephanie.
Okay. Let's see. Officially, I started in 2013. I received I have a family of educators. So it's just, education has been a priority in the upbringing of how being raised.
I started in 1995, and I was influenced by my favorite teacher, Jacqueline Jones Harvey.
Fun. So now that we have introductions, I want to ask, what value do you feel education has in your life, and do you feel that has reflected in your career or in the American education system?
Read that question one more time.
What value do you feel education has in your life, and do you feel that has been reflected in your career of the American education system?
Education is part of my family's value systems. Mm-hmm. So growing up in the 70s, my parents were always like, God, family, education / work. So as a kid, my work was to go to school and earn good grades. Mm-hmm. I grew up at a time where we were taught to go to school, to go to college. That was like, what you do. Now, a little bit different. You have all kind of options for a way of making a living. Some people choose to have a trade, but for a while, that used to kind of be frowned upon. Not that they didn't earn good money, but they always thought that education was the way, you should go if you had an opportunity to go to college. So that's the way I grew up valuing and viewing education.
And see, like in my family, it's like the standard was you were going. It wasn't a choice. You were going to college, and were you going to college? And so it was the expectation in family, not just in my immediate family, but extended family as well. We all went to college, kind of like that was the expectation. And that's what you did. And it played a role in our lives where even though like with me and my 3 siblings, even though all 4 of us attended school, I was the youngest, and I was the first one to
felt that
get
I've learned and grown to understand since being in academia, and I just want to give a little dedication to that.
A whole lot of discussion about it, except for where you want to go.
For some context, if you don't know, I'm actually graduating in a couple of days. Next Saturday, I don't know when this video will be uploaded, but May 10th, I will become a graduate of Texas Christian University. Woohoo! Shout outs to me. So I'm really excited for that. And the one thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to my education here at TCU is how that has grown for me to love studying these topics that I have. So if you don't know, I'm getting my degree in English literature with a minor in comparative race and ethnic studies. And I have pretty much, they kind of intersect with one another, but I've learned about not only literature, but I've also learned about a lot of social justice topics. So I'm very passionate about social justice topics because they are so interesting to me and they are so important to the world that we live in currently and where we're going. So yeah, a lot of people ask me what brought me into studying comparative race and studies. On TCU's campus, we call it CREST for short. But so for the rest of the video, I'm going to be calling CREST, but no, it stands for Comparative Race and Ethics Studies. So a lot of people ask me why I decided to take CREST on as a minor. And it's really because I truly enjoyed the classes and I truly enjoyed the coursework and what we were learning in the classes. I felt like it pertained to who I was and what I am and my identity, and helped me understand other people's identity very thoroughly. So that's one reason why I decided to continue doing it as my minor, and I've taken so many CREST classes since I've been here. I have learned about things in regards to my own identity with being with Black feminism. I've learned about feminism color across different races of women. I have learned about Afrofuturisms as of this semester. So Dr. Mack, if you watch this, I love you. Love that class this semester. It was amazing. And yes, I've learned about LGBTQ topics since I've been here, and I am very much so an ally for the community. And I feel like it is just so important to know this knowledge around social justice topics, so that, I mean, for most people say that so you don't become a bigot, but for me, like, so that you don't become misinformed, and have empathy for people that come from other places and other backgrounds that you may not have understood before. So I think it's so important that we teach these children topics as far as critical race theory, LGBTQ topics, and other things like that, so that they can become way more self-aware adults. Talking to you. But so that people can become more self-aware adults, because we are living in a society where people are trying to take these topics away out of schools, and they will continue to. And it's so funny how they're getting rid of it, but half of them don't even read the books. I don't want to get demonetized, but basically, I would just say this: half these people that are trying to ban these things do not even open these books to understand them. So yes, it's so funny how we, again, going back to this idea of what sort of education that we put on a pedestal versus what we don't put on a pedestal. So again, we're thinking about this, and I feel like there is no other person to talk about this phenomenon on the value of what we think is valuable in education than none other than the beautiful, amazing, talented as she was, Bell Hooks. Yes, I know, I'm such a Black female literary mind bringing up Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks predicts everything, guys. But yes, Bell Hooks' book, Pedagogy of Hope, Teaching Community, is a book that I read for this project, and I really want to share some things with you as far as what this entails and what this was so good about pedagogy. And basically, I felt like this book really spoke to how I feel about academia currently. And it was written, I forgot when it was written, 90? I forgot, I'm sorry. Please fact check me, I'll fact check myself. But it's written back then. It was written not currently, but back then. And Pedagogy of Hope, it really does talk about how we have lost hope in our own education system. We have lost the sauce in what it means to teach children the value of things that pertain to themselves, that we only put certain things on a pedestal in education. And I will sit here and say that I have seen that in my own time here at TCU, that the departments that I am in are not as valued as my counterparts and my classmates who do engineering, who do any type of sciences. My little liberal arts mind and my little liberal arts department doesn't get much attention and comfort from the campus because, but we do not get as much attention, and we don't get as many resources, and we don't get as much help as other people in other departments, which also really sucks. But Bell Hooks does talk a lot about how we consider social justice topics, especially, as a minor, a concentration. Why would you even want to dedicate all your time in college to studying these things? That it's not as important as learning about all this other shit. But like, babes, these are topics that are needed because a lot of people do not know that our future is predicted by what we've had in our history and past. And our future is only predicted if we understand where we're going from the idea of where we are now. We cannot think to advance people or to actually have empathy and understanding towards others if we do not prioritize actually building and fostering those communities amongst people that are not normally, sorry, how do I say this, but that are not normally who aren't really taken care of by society, marginalized people. If we're not understanding marginalized people and where they come from, how can you understand where to go? Like, that's my main thing. How can you understand how to go if we're not sitting here studying their history, what they've been through, what we've been through, what Black people have been through, what Hispanic people have been through, what Asian people, disabled people, what queer people have gone through. We cannot sit here and actually grow as a society if we do not understand one another. So that is something that Bell Hooks said, like, you have to teach these topics. We have to. So I'm going to get into some quotes that I feel were really pertinent to this video. And yeah, so I'm going to get into, yes. So this is the main one that me and my lovely professor were dissecting for at least 30 minutes as we read it. But it states, in these communal spaces, a student can engage in the insurrection of subjugated knowledge. So it's a mouthful. It's a lot to dissect, but communal spaces being open spaces, public spaces, engage in knowledge that is pretty much taken over, or knowledge is not as valuable and that is dimmed. That they basically are engaging in knowledge that is not seen as valuable. And that's something that a lot of people are not willing to talk about, is that a lot of these university spaces do not want us engaging in knowledge that they think is not valuable. That it is radical to even be talking about these things, that it's no importance, because again, we associate these things with a minor, a psych concentration, because that's how we view marginalized people, if you haven't noticed. So yes, I do want to talk about another quote, and she states, from the onset, the presence of Black studies created a context for counter-narrative, one in which learning could take place that did not reinforce white supremacy. Yes, again, going back to this idea, we want learning that does not reinforce the negative things that we know about Black Americans, that we know about, that we know from white supremacy. We want things that don't engage with that. And it is so crazy. We're going to get to that in a second. But the last thing I want to talk about is that teaching community a pedagogy of hope offers practical wisdom about what we do and can continue to do to make the classroom a place that is life-sustaining and mind-expanding, a place that is life-sustaining, mind-expanding, a place that is liberating mutually, where teacher and student together work in partnership. So teaching these topics, teaching this idea of knowledge that is so important, helps foster community, which I cannot stress this enough. And when we get to the last part, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth when we get to another person's book. But we cannot think to move forward as a people if we are looking back. And we cannot think to move forward and build community if we are not teaching these things, if we're not understanding one another. In times like this, which we are in 2025, it is crazy out here. Yeah, sorry. It is crazy out here. We are quite literally in an era where these things are not prized. Like, it's crazy to me. And the last thing we need in a means of society telling us what we should and should not do are people fighting each other. We don't need that. We need community. We need to build community. That's why she wrote this book, to make sure that we are fostering community with one another and that we are growing with one another. And you know, she said another thing on page 15, that we must work for money rather than meaning. Why can't we work for meaning and fulfillment in our life? Everything's about making money. in a society. Again, going back to what we value for education. That it literally stems back to what we choose to value in our own community and education, and what we think are topics that are so important that aren't important to others. It is insane to me that we put such things on a pedestal that really have no depth to our souls. So yeah. And I think one more thing I'm getting into from the book. I know I have so many quotes from this book. It's so good, guys. You guys need to read Pedagogy. But like many professors, I naively believe that the more I moved up in the academic ladder, the more freedom I would gain, only to find that the greater academic success carried with it even more pressure to conform, to ally oneself into institutional goals and values rather than the intellectual work. So yes, again, pointing to this idea in academia and how we really do keep a lot of this information that we study in social topics in academia. And I really want to work to take that outside of academia and truly grow from something else. And that's all I really have to say for that. It's true, it's dandy, it's insane. But yeah. So yeah, that's Pedagogy. And that's what I want to talk about. And I think that is a good place to end, is that we need to start valuing other things that do not fall into the eyes of white supremacy in our educational learning. And I will say that I have grown so much to understand what I value and what I feel was good to my learning. And had I not taken up CRES, had I not taken up CRES, I feel like I would have never grown and understood myself and other people had I not done it. So, for lack of better words, I thank myself. I thank everyone that is in the department. And yeah, that is part 3. So yeah, we're about to go ahead and enter into our final part. Where do we go in building and fostering new community? Where do we go in continuing to value this education in a future where it could be dystopian, guys? We could be entering into a dystopian way of life pretty soon. But no, to talk about Afrofuturisms and the advancement of what it means to grow and move into a place where Afrofuturisms is a thing, and to talk about where we're going and where we probably are already. We cannot talk about this without mentioning Octavia E. Butler's Octavia E. Butler's 1990s novel, Parable of the Sower. Yeah, of the Sower. So this book, for lack of better words, guys, it is great to read. It's a very good read. I loved it. It was so good. But it's also a little scary because the timeline low-key matches up with the timeline of today. So if you don't know, Parable of the Sower follows a 15-year-old Black girl named Lauren. She navigates a dystopian world where an oligarchy government has taken over and there is a depletion of natural resources. People are strung out on drugs and the world has come to a complete free-for-all. Lauren and her peers are trying to find ways to adapt to this environment and find solutions. Lauren thinks that valuing education and teaching people the ways of the world and nature can help adapt people to survival. So, basically, what we were talking about with bell hooks as far as fostering community and growing our platforms as far as teaching community and teaching these topics to help keep us together. I said some of the same things at the same time. Sorry for that. But no, this book is great, and I just gave you the summary of it. If you want more of an in-depth reading, I can do a video on me completely, because I can spend a whole freaking video just talking about breaking down every chapter. But long story short, what makes it so freaking scary is that basically the timeline is set from the years of 2024 to 2027. And again, guys, she wrote this book back in the 90s. And it's just such scary things that match so well to what's going on currently in our thing. And it's just crazy to me how she really did predict the future, guys. This beautiful Black woman predicted the future, and a lot of it is happening. It's crazy to me. But Yes. In the book, the reason I'm calling this final card or this final chapter, Earthseed's Future, is because the little educational program that Lauren builds in the book is called Earthseed. And it's meaning like to set the foundation, to water the seeds, to grow new opportunity and new ideas of thinking for her people and her peers. And so again, guys, we are pointing to the idea of what is going to take for us to move forward as a Black community, what it's going to take, and that is educating each other. We have seen it from the beginning of this part of this video where we were talking about how no matter what educational sense that we had, no matter what any type of education we had, we taught it. It didn't matter if it was small, it didn't matter if it was on a college level, on a 12th grade level, on a second grade level, we were teaching it because we knew that the only guides to freedom, to freedom was for us to actually be educated and to grow in that sense. Had we not taken that in and valued that enough, we would not be here. We would not have even liberation in the slightest if it was not for educational purposes. So I have to say this book was the greatest nail in the coffin to teach the idea of why in the means and the problems that we go through when we are in destitution, completely, we have to take it upon ourselves to help foster community. We have to teach ourselves. We have to grow each other. That's all that matters. So, in my heart of hearts, I hope that in these coming years, with everything going on in our society, with everything and everyone telling us how we should feel and where we should go, that we take the time to build community, that we use our education not just for our own personal gain, because I know most of us like to do that and brag, but no, it's to pass it on to the next person next to us, to make sure that our aunties, our grandmothers, that our children will know this knowledge and to keep carrying the tradition. This project was made in the sense that I want people to know that education has always and will forever be the main thing that Black people consume. We are not new to education. Education is not a newness to us. We are true to this. I'm going to get into some statistics that I was going to put at the beginning of this video, but I felt like it was, I don't know. But we obtained the most master's degrees, the most PhDs, the most undergraduate degrees. We pertain those things. Like in my own personal life, where I'm from and with the community I grew up in, I hardly ever meet people that do not have degrees, that do not have education. It is so valuable and imperative to us as people. Everyone has it. So what I want you guys to understand and what I want you to take away from this video is that the only way, and I've said this so many times in video, the only way we're ever going to stay together as a community, that we can even build resilience around what's going on in the world, is to keep education, to keep going and to keep being educated, and to help us stay together. That's all that matters. Hi guys. So I'm so glad if you enjoyed this video. I'm so glad you did. This is my very first video essay, guys. So I'm so glad if you enjoyed this video. I'm so glad you did. This is my very first video essay on YouTube. I have never done this a day in my life. I'm so excited for you guys to see it. But for the most part, my name is Juris Nicole, and I am new to the game. Like I said at the beginning of this video, please follow me on my social media, which is Nicole_Crit, 13 on Instagram and Nicole_Crit on TikTok. And yeah, I can't wait to see where this journey in YouTube goes. I love watching these, so it's so fun to be making them now. And yes, please like, share, and subscribe. And y'all have a blessed day. Bye, lovelies. Mwah.